talking about generals in the army. The army's so alienated. You're without women. I mean, if it hadn't been for masturbation, everybody go crazy. And so, of course, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on, even with generals. I mean, that's the way it is. But I got out of the army and I ended up working. I owned a newspaper after a little while. I did a suburban.
You owned a newspaper?
Well, I started a paper with a friend in a suburban newspaper, and we were just smart. I had a wonderful friend who was a photographer. And the first edition of the paper was in a small rural community, a suburban community in Chicago. And the first edition in the center, what they call the double truck center, my friend came. It happened to be the first day. Our first edition came right at the time that they were starting a new school year, and the kindergarten kids were being their first day, and he went and took pictures with somebody there getting every name. Took 100 pictures of kids coming, and we ran maybe 40 photographs in the first edition of children, that frightened look and that scary look, some happy, some sad, and we were just off and running. That's what it is. Right. It's all getting to the base, and after a little while we were so successful I got scared. I didn't want to do it. Making money, I just didn't want to do it, so I left and went to work for UPI, then I worked for AP, got to cover the Pentagon, went overseas, covered the war. Mostly I did a lot in the military, covering the Pentagon. The war was insane. It was just an insane war. And what's objectivity? Objectivity then was pretending that we don't have an opinion about the war, and that's just crazy. So I left that. I got in trouble because I was writing critical things about the war, and I went to work. I did freelance, and then I went to work for somebody running for president against Lyndon Johnson, Eugene McCarthy. And because he was committed to the war, he was a Benedictine, and very devout. And he did something that was.
He wanted to stop the war?
Well, not only that, he talked about the war as being immoral. And those are words you don't hear in politics anymore. He was a difficult man, but I was in love with him in the sense because he was willing to say this is immoral. What we did in Iraq is immoral. You can argue about getting rid of Saddam or not. The way we left the country was immoral. We've left the country in ruins. That's not moral. We didn't do right. And if we're not done with Iraq, we're going to be hell to pay there too.
Do you think that the war in Iraq would have stopped sooner if somebody had done a story on it like you did on the Vietnam War, because it said it hastened the end of the war, the story?
I don't think My Lai hastened anything. The war ended because we got beat. And I think what happened there, and I believe there was nothing, this surge was a fantastic or another fantasy. All that happened is we began to pay some of the Sunni tribes people that we've been afraid to deal with because they were Baathists, and I'm sure most of you can follow what I'm saying. We were anti-Baathist, even though the Baathists were
the Saddam party.
The Saddam, but they were extremely hostile to jihadists, just as Bashar Assad has been, and his father and he both carried on a tradition of doing incredible intelligence work against the Muslim Brotherhood, which we used after 9/11. We went to that. But anyway, the point is about Vietnam. All that happened is we began to pay some of the people we thought were our enemies to kill the more extreme, if you want to call them Al-Qaeda. I think Al-Qaeda is a myth now, but American politicians use it to scare us. Al-Qaeda in North Africa. I mean, they're jihadist fanatics. There's been jihadist fanatics for,
So what you're saying in a way is not your journalism ended the war, but money. Money ends wars. If you start paying people?
Well, they paid him to begin to kill the people we couldn't kill.